Welcome to the Cheating Tales Lab. We hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. Jack Thornton's sensible sedan rolled into the driveway of his modest suburban home at 4:30 p.m. on a Wednesday. The 35-year-old high school history teacher sighed. This wasn't how the annual Gettysburg field trip was supposed to end. "Damn you, Tommy Hawkins," Jack muttered, remembering the sickly pale face of the freshman who decorated the tour bus floor with his lunch. The kid had claimed motion sickness, but Jack strongly suspected it had more to do with the 6 hot dogs Tommy had inhaled at the Battlefield Cafe. As he approached the front door, briefcase in hand, Jack heard his wife Sarah's hushed voice drifting through an open window. Sarah was many things, but quiet wasn't one of them. Curiosity piqued, he paused, key hovering near the lock. "I'll be the best wife and mother to them, until Jack gets his wealthy father's inheritance. Then I'll take everything in divorce." Jack's world tilted on its axis. He must have misheard. There was no way Sarah, his Sarah of 10 years, would say something like that. They'd talked about having kids, for Christ's sake. But as he stood there, rooted to the spot, Sarah's voice continued. "Don't worry, Robert. I've got it all planned out. Jack doesn't suspect a thing. He's such a Boy Scout, always so trusting. It's almost too easy." With trembling hands, Jack pulled out his phone and hit record, capturing the tail end of Sarah's conversation. I know. It's taking longer than we thought. But Jack's father isn't exactly on death's door. We just need to be patient. Once I have the money, we can start our new life together. Yes, I love you too. I'll call you later." The sound of Sarah's footsteps approaching snapped Jack out of his daze. He retreated to his car, fumbling with the keys before managing to start the engine and pull away. He drove aimlessly, his mind a chaotic whirlwind of betrayal and disbelief. He found himself at a nearby park, the place where he and Sarah had their first date. The irony wasn't lost on him as he parked and stumbled out of the car. He collapsed onto a bench, his legs suddenly too weak to support him. With shaking hands, he replayed the recording. Each word was a dagger to his heart, confirming that he hadn't imagined it. His wife, the woman he'd pledged to love and cherish till death do them part, was nothing but a gold-digging fraud. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Jack pulled out his phone again. This time, he wasn't recording. He was researching. Divorce laws, inheritance rights, anything that might give him an edge in the battle he knew was coming. He'd never been one for confrontation. He was a history teacher, for God's sake. He dealt in facts and dates, not legal warfare. But as he sat there, watching families stroll by, and couples holding hands, something hardened inside him. He'd be damned if he let Sarah and this Robert character take everything he'd worked for. By the time darkness fell, Jack had a plan. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He'd need help, though. Professional help. And he knew just who to call. The next morning found Jack sitting in the sleek, modern office of Diane Lopez, divorce attorney extraordinaire. She had a reputation for being a shark in the courtroom, which was exactly what Jack needed right now. Diane listened impassively as Jack recounted his story, her face betraying no emotion. When he finished, she leaned back in her leather chair, fingers steepled under her chin. "Well, Mr. Thornton, you've certainly found yourself in quite the predicament," she said, her voice cool and professional. "The good news is, you've got solid evidence of your wife's intentions. That recording will be invaluable." Jack nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time since he'd overheard Sarah's conversation. "The bad news," Diane continued, "is that your wife clearly has a plan, and if she's been working on this for a while, she may have already taken steps to protect herself. We need to move quickly." She outlined a strategy that made Jack's head spin. Gather more evidence, secure assets, prepare for a clean break. It all sounded so clinical, so devoid of emotion. But then again, that's probably what he needed right now. "One more thing, Mr. Thornton," Diane said as Jack stood to leave. "Don't tip your hand. Act normal until we're ready to make our move. Can you do that?" Jack thought about the betrayal, the lies, The years of his life wasted on a woman who saw him as nothing more than a meal ticket. He thought about the future he'd planned, now turned to ashes. "Yes," he said, his voice hard. "I can do that." The drive home was a blur. Jack's mind raced with everything Diane had told him, everything he needed to do. But as he pulled into his driveway, a sense of calm settled over him. He had a plan now. He wasn't helpless. He found Sarah in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She smiled when she saw him, and for a moment, Jack's resolve wavered. How could this be the same woman who had so coldly discussed destroying his life? "Hey, honey," Sarah said, leaning in for a kiss. "How was your day?" Jack forced himself to smile, to act normal. "Oh, the usual. Kids who'd rather be anywhere but in class." He watched her as she turned back to her chopping, chattering away about her day at the office. How many times had they done this? How many evenings had he sat here, listening to her stories, thinking they were building a life together? "Sarah," he said, interrupting her mid-sentence, "we need to talk." She turned, a look of confusion on her face. "What's wrong?" Jack took a deep breath. This was it. No turning back now. "I know about your plan," he said, his voice steady. "I know about Robert." The knife Sarah had been holding clattered to the floor. Her face went pale, then flushed red. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. Jack pulled out his phone, playing the damning recording. As Sarah listened, her face cycled through a range of emotions: shock, anger, fear. "It was just a hypothetical conversation," she said weakly when the recording ended. "I was just talking to a friend about—" "Save it," Jack cut her off. He pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase. "These are divorce papers. I want you out of the house. Tonight." Sarah's demeanor changed in an instant. The mask of the loving wife fell away, revealing the cold, calculating woman beneath. "You can't do this," she hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." But Jack was already moving, heading for their shared office. With quick, precise movements, he began canceling their joint credit cards and transferring funds from their shared accounts to ones in his name only. Sarah followed, her voice rising in pitch and volume as she hurled insults and threats. Jack tuned her out, focusing on the task at hand. When he finished, he turned to face her. "You have an hour to pack your things and leave," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property." As Sarah stomped off to pack, Jack felt a strange sense of detachment. This woman, this stranger in his house, was no longer his wife. She was an opponent, nothing more. True to his word, an hour later, Jack changed the locks. He watched from the window as Sarah's car disappeared down the street, her taillights fading into the distance. He knew it wasn't over. Sarah wouldn't give up that easily. But for now, he had breathing room. Time to plan his next move. The next morning, Jack met with Elena Ramirez, the principal of Jefferson High where he taught. She was a stern woman with kind eyes, always fair but never a pushover. Jack had always respected her, and now he found himself grateful for her no-nonsense attitude. "Elena," he said, his voice grave, "I need to request an extended leave of absence. There's been a family emergency." Elena's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't press for details. "Of course, Jack. Take whatever time you need. Your students will miss you, but we can arrange for a substitute." Jack nodded, relief washing over him. One less loose end to worry about. Back at the house, Jack began the process of dismantling his life. He sold most of his belongings, keeping only essentials and a few sentimental items. It felt oddly liberating, shedding the trappings of his old life. As he worked, he thought about his father, William Thornton. They hadn't spoken in years, their relationship strained by old resentments and misunderstandings. But now, with Sarah's plan out in the open, Jack knew he had to warn him. The phone call was awkward, stilted. Jack didn't reveal the full extent of what had happened, just enough to put his father on guard against Sarah's machinations. "Dad," he said, his voice rough with emotion, I know we've had our differences, but please be careful. Sarah, she's not who we thought she was." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When William spoke, his voice was gruff but not unkind. "I appreciate the warning, son. Take care of yourself. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Maybe," Jack thought, "something good could come out of this mess after all." With his affairs in order and his father warned, Jack was ready for the final step of his plan. He needed to disappear. He withdrew a large amount of cash from his accounts, enough to live on for a while, without leaving an electronic trail. He bought a used car from a private seller, paying in cash. And then, in the dead of night, he drove away from the life he'd known, heading west with no real destination in mind. As the miles rolled by, Jack thought about Sarah. By now, she would have realized he was gone. He could imagine her frantic calls to their mutual friends, her increasingly desperate attempts to locate him through his workplace. But she would find nothing. Jack Thornton, high school history teacher and devoted husband, had vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks as Jack made his way across the country. He took odd jobs here and there, paying in cash and using fake names. He slept in cheap motels or in his car, always moving, never staying in one place long enough to be remembered. Finally, after nearly a month on the road, he found himself in Portland, Oregon. Something about the city called to him. Maybe it was the constant drizzle, matching his mood. Or maybe it was just far enough from his old life to feel safe. He found a small apartment in a nondescript neighborhood and started looking for work. His teaching credentials were useless now. Using them would leave a trail Sarah could follow. But he had other skills. He started advertising his services as a private tutor, specializing in history and literature. Slowly, cautiously, Jack began to build a new life. He made a few acquaintances, though he was careful to keep everyone at arm's length. He couldn't risk getting close to anyone, not when his past could come crashing down on him at any moment. At night, alone in his sparse apartment, Jack would sometimes think about Sarah. He wondered if she was still with Robert, if they were already spending his father's money. He wondered if she ever felt guilty about what she'd done. But mostly, he thought about the future. For the first time in his adult life, he was truly on his own. No wife, no job, no roots tying him down. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating. He had a chance to reinvent himself, to become someone new. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Jack slowly began to heal. The pain of Sarah's betrayal never fully went away, but it became duller, more manageable. He threw himself into his work, building a reputation as an excellent tutor. He even started developing online history courses, finding a new passion in bringing the past to life for students around the world. Jack Thornton, the betrayed husband and disillusioned teacher, was gone. In his place stood a new man, one forged in the crucible of betrayal and determination. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. Jack Thornton stared at his computer screen, the harsh glow illuminating his face in the dim Portland apartment. At 41, his hair had a bit more gray, and lines had formed around his eyes. But those eyes still held the same intensity they had 6 years ago when he'd fled Cincinnati. The clock on his desk read 2:17 a.m. Another late night, working on his online history courses. Who knew that abandoning his teaching career would lead him here? Turns out, there was a whole world of students hungry for knowledge beyond the confines of a traditional classroom. His phone buzzed, startling him. Who the hell would be calling at this hour? The number wasn't one he recognized, but it had a Cincinnati area code. His heart raced as he answered. "Hello, is this Jack Thornton?" The voice was unfamiliar, clinical. "Who's asking?" "This is Mercy Hospital in Cincinnati. I'm calling about your father, William Thornton. He's been admitted and you're listed as his emergency contact." Jack's world tilted on its axis. His father, the man he hadn't spoken to in years, save for that cryptic warning about Sarah. How is he?" Jack managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. The nurse's voice softened. "I'm afraid it's quite serious, Mr. Thornton. Your father is asking for you." Jack closed his eyes, memories flooding back. The bitter arguments, the disappointment in his father's eyes, the years of silence. And now this. "I'll be there as soon as I can," he heard himself say. As he hung up, Jack's mind raced. Going back to Cincinnati meant facing everything he'd run from. Sarah, the life he'd left behind, the possibility that his father's inheritance, the very thing that had sparked this whole mess, might now be within reach. He booked the first flight out, throwing clothes into a suitcase with trembling hands. As the plane took off, Jack stared out the window, watching Portland disappear beneath him. He was leaving behind 6 years of carefully constructed anonymity. What would he find waiting for him in Cincinnati? The hospital corridor seemed endless. The smell of disinfectant burning Jack's nostrils as he made his way to his father's room. He paused outside the door, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Nothing could have prepared him for the sight that greeted him. There, sitting by his father's bedside, was Sarah, his Sarah, the woman who'd plotted to destroy him, now playing the role of doting daughter-in-law. She looked up as he entered, her eyes widening in shock. "Jack!" she gasped. Before he could respond, a weak voice came from the bed. "Son, is that you?" Jack turned to see his father, a frail shadow of the imposing man he'd once been. William Thornton's eyes were sunken, his skin sallow, but a spark of life returned to them as he gazed at his long-lost son. "Dad," Jack said, moving to the bedside. "I'm here." William's hand trembled as he reached for Jack's. "I didn't think you'd come." "Of course I came," Jack replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. He glanced at Sarah, who was watching the reunion with an unreadable expression. "Jack," William said, his voice barely above a whisper, "there's someone I want you to meet." He gestured weakly to the other side of the bed. Jack hadn't even noticed the other man in the room. As he looked up, he felt the floor drop out from under him. "This is Robert," William said. "Your uncle. He and Sarah have been taking care of me." Uncle Robert, the name from Sarah's phone call 6 years ago, the man she'd planned to run away with. Jack's mind reeled as he struggled to process this new information. Robert stepped forward, offering his hand. "It's good to finally meet you, Jack. I've heard so much about you." Jack shook the hand automatically, feeling as if he'd stepped into some bizarre alternate reality. His uncle, the man his wife had been having an affair with, was his own flesh and blood. As the shock began to wear off, Jack's analytical mind kicked in. He observed the way Sarah and Robert stood slightly apart, the nervous glances they exchanged. It was clear they'd been working together, manipulating his father for years. A movement caught Jack's eye. A nurse had entered the room, her dark eyes taking in the tense scene. She moved to check William's vitals, offering Jack a sympathetic smile. "I'm Maria," she said softly. "I've been taking care of your father. It's good to see him smile again." Jack nodded, grateful for the momentary distraction. As Maria worked, he noticed her watching the interactions between Sarah, Robert, and his father with a furrowed brow. She seemed to sense the undercurrents of tension in the room. As Jack stood there, surrounded by the ghosts of his past and this new, unexpected player, he made a decision. He couldn't run away again. Not this time. His father needed him, and he needed answers. "I'm staying," he announced, meeting Sarah's startled gaze. "For as long as it takes." Robert clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture that made Jack's skin crawl. "That's wonderful news, nephew. We have so much catching up to do." Jack forced a smile, his mind already formulating a plan. He'd come back to Cincinnati to say goodbye to his father. Now, it seemed, he had a mystery to solve and a truth to uncover. As he settled into the chair by his father's bedside, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long and treacherous journey. But this time, he was ready. This time, he wouldn't be caught off guard. Let the games begin, he thought, watching Sarah and Robert exchange worried glances. "I'm not the same man who left 6 years ago, and this time I'm not running away." The funeral was a somber affair, the kind William Thornton would have hated. Jack stood at the graveside, surrounded by people he barely recognized, all offering condolences with varying degrees of sincerity. Sarah and Robert hovered nearby, playing their parts to perfection. As the last of the mourners drifted away, Marcus Chun, the family attorney, approached Jack. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, his voice low. "When you're ready, we need to discuss your father's will." Jack nodded, steeling himself for what was to come. He'd known this moment was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. The reading of the will took place in Marcus's office, a wood-paneled room that smelled of leather and old books. Jack sat across from Sarah and Robert, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus cleared his throat and began to read. "I, William Thornton, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my estate as follows." What followed was unlike anything Jack had expected. His father, it seemed, had a flair for the dramatic even in death. The will laid out a series of conditions, tasks that the potential heirs would need to complete to prove their loyalty and worthiness. "This is ridiculous," Sarah sputtered, her carefully crafted mask slipping for a moment. "We've been caring for William for years. Surely that counts for something." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The will is quite clear, Mrs. Thornton. All potential heirs must complete the task set forth." Robert leaned forward, his face a study in false concern. "But what about Jack? He abandoned the family. Surely he's not eligible." Jack felt a surge of anger, but he kept his voice calm. "I didn't abandon anyone. I left because of circumstances beyond my control." He met Sarah's eyes, watching her flinch at the implied accusation. Marcus held up a hand. "Regardless of past events, the will states that all family members have the right to participate, including Jack." What followed was a bitter battle, fought not with fists or weapons, but with legal maneuvers and carefully worded accusations. Sarah and Robert contested the will, throwing everything they had at discrediting Jack. But Jack wasn't without resources of his own. He presented evidence of Sarah's original plan, hinting at Robert's involvement without revealing his full hand. The recording he'd made 6 years ago became a powerful weapon, though he used it sparingly, aware that it was his ace in the hole. As the days turned into weeks, Jack found himself immersed in a world of legal jargon and family politics. He discovered depths of strength he didn't know he possessed, standing firm against the onslaught of Sarah and Robert's machinations. But it wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. As Jack dug deeper, he began to uncover troubling inconsistencies in the family company's finances. Late-night research sessions and clandestine meetings with loyal employees painted a disturbing picture of embezzlement and fraud. One night, as Jack pored over financial records in his hotel room, he heard a soft knock at the door. He opened it to find Sarah standing there, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. He watched as she paced the room, wringing her hands. "I didn't know," she finally said. "About Robert, about the company. I swear, Jack, I had no idea how deep this went." Jack studied her, trying to gauge her sincerity. "Why should I believe you?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm trapped, Jack. I made a terrible mistake, and now I don't know how to get out." As Sarah poured out her story, Jack felt a mix of emotions: anger, pity, and a grudging admiration for her survival instinct. She painted a picture of manipulation and deceit, with Robert as the puppet master pulling all the strings. When she finished, Jack remained silent for a long moment. "I can't trust you," he finally said. "But if what you're saying is true, we might be able to help each other." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "What do you need me to do?" "For now, nothing. Act normal. Let Robert think he's still in control. I'll be in touch." As Sarah left, Jack felt a glimmer of hope. He might have just gained an unexpected ally in this fight, but he couldn't let his guard down. Not yet. Not when there was still so much at stake. Jack woke to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly. Bleary-eyed, he reached for it, squinting at the screen. It was Elena Ramirez, his old principal from Jefferson High. "Jack, have you seen the news?" He sat up, instantly alert. "What news?" "It's all over the local stations. Sarah and Robert, they're saying terrible things about you. Elder abuse, abandonment, theft from the family business." "Jack, what's going on?" Jack's mind raced. He'd expected Robert to fight dirty. But this was a declaration of war. He flipped on the TV, his stomach churning as he watched Sarah, tears in her eyes, recount how he'd abandoned his family. Robert stood beside her, playing the role of the supportive uncle to perfection. "Jack Thornton is not the man we thought he was," Robert said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "He left his family behind, ignored his father's illness, and now he wants to swoop in and claim an inheritance he doesn't deserve." Jack's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from his online course platform. His ratings were plummeting, flooded with one-star reviews and accusations of fraud. "Damn it," he muttered, realizing the scope of Robert's attack. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. Robert was trying to destroy everything Jack had built. He needed allies and fast. He dialed Elena back. "Elena, I need your help. Everything they're saying, it's not true. I can explain, but I need time." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, "What do you need?" Jack felt a surge of gratitude. "Can you reach out to my old colleagues? My students? Anyone who knew me before? I need character witnesses, people who can vouch for me." "Consider it done," Elena said. "And Jack, we've got your back." As he hung up, Jack's mind was already formulating a plan. He couldn't match Robert's media blitz dollar for dollar, but he had something Robert didn't: the truth. He set up a live stream, reaching out to his online students around the world. For hours, he told his story, laying bare the betrayal that had driven him from Cincinnati. He showed evidence of his continued work in education, the lives he'd touched through his online courses. As he spoke, messages of support flooded in. Former students shared stories of how he'd inspired them. Colleagues vouched for his character. Even some of his current online students, scattered across the globe, joined in to defend their teacher. But Robert wasn't done. As Jack's counteroffensive gained traction, his website came under attack. A sophisticated DDoS assault brought down his entire online infrastructure. Jack was at his wit's end when his phone rang again. This time, it was a voice from the past. "Jack, it's Mike. Mike Lawson. Remember me?" Jack's mind flashed back to summers spent playing baseball, shared confidences, a friendship that had once seemed unbreakable. "Mike, yeah, of course. It's been a long time. Listen, I've been seeing what's happening on the news. It doesn't add up. The Jack I knew would never do the things they're saying. I'm a detective now. If you need help getting to the bottom of this, I'm in." Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Mike, you have no idea how much that means. There's a lot I need to tell you." As Jack filled Mike in on the details of the past 6 years, he felt a glimmer of hope. The tide was turning. Robert and Sarah had overplayed their hand, and now the truth was starting to come out. But Jack knew this was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. As he ended the call with Mike, he steeled himself for what lay ahead. The inheritance, his reputation, his very future. It was all on the line. But for the first time since he'd returned to Cincinnati, Jack felt ready. He had allies. He had the truth on his side. And he had a score to settle. Let Robert and Sarah bring their worst, he thought. "I'm not running anymore. This ends here, one way or another." Jack Thornton sat in his dimly lit hotel room, surrounded by stacks of documents and a laptop screen glowing with financial records. He rubbed his eyes, exhausted but determined. The inheritance battle had taken its toll, but he knew he was close to uncovering something big. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find Kate Blackwell, the private investigator he'd hired to dig into Robert's past. Her face was grim, her eyes sharp with purpose. "We need to talk," she said. brushing past him into the room. Jack closed the door, his heart racing. "What did you find?" Kate pulled out a thick file from her bag. "Your uncle's been a busy boy, Jack, and not in a good way." For the next hour, Kate laid out a pattern of behavior that made Jack's stomach churn. Elder abuse, spanning years and multiple victims. Fraud that went beyond the family company, touching businesses across the state. And most disturbing of all, connections to organized crime that hinted at even darker dealings. "Jesus," Jack muttered, leafing through the evidence. "This is worse than I thought." Kate nodded. "Your uncle's made some powerful friends and some dangerous enemies. You need to be careful, Jack. This goes beyond a family squabble now." Jack's mind raced. He needed to act, but he had to be smart about it. One wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. "I need to make a call," he said, reaching for his phone. The number he dialed wasn't one he'd ever used before, but it was one he'd memorized just in case. When a woman's voice answered, Jack took a deep breath. "This is Jack Thornton. I have information about Robert Thornton that the FBI might be interested in." Special Agent Samantha Torres listened intently as Jack laid out what he knew, careful to keep his own involvement anonymous. When he finished, there was a long pause. "Mr. Thornton, if what you're saying is true, we'll need to move quickly. Can you come in to make a formal statement?" Jack agreed, setting up a meeting for the next day. As he hung up, he felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The wheels were in motion now. There was no turning back. Over the next few weeks, Jack found himself living a double life. By day, he continued the inheritance battle, presenting a calm facade to Sarah and Robert, but his nights were filled with clandestine meetings with Agent Torres, poring over evidence and building a case against his uncle, to maintain his cover and begin rebuilding his tarnished reputation. Jack started volunteering at a local veteran center. The work was rewarding, giving him a sense of purpose beyond the legal battles and investigations. It was at the center that he ran into Maria Gonzalez, the nurse who had cared for his father. She was there visiting her grandfather, a Korean War vet. "Jack," she said, surprise evident in her voice, "I didn't expect to see you here." He explained about the volunteer work, watching as her face softened with understanding. "That's wonderful," she said. "These men and women, they've been through so much. It's good to see someone caring for them." As they talked, Jack found himself opening up to Maria in a way he hadn't with anyone since returning to Cincinnati. She listened without judgment, offering support and, occasionally, valuable information about Robert's visits to the hospital during William's illness. Their friendship grew over shared cups of terrible hospital coffee and late-night conversations. Jack found himself looking forward to their talks, a bright spot in the increasingly tense atmosphere of the inheritance battle. But even as Jack made progress, he could see Robert beginning to unravel. The man's behavior became erratic, his temper shorter. Sarah, caught between the two men, looked increasingly haggard and afraid. The diner was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over the worn Formica tables. Jack sat in a booth near the back, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold. His eyes flicked to the door every few seconds, tension coiling in his gut. When Sarah walked in, he almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the polished, confident woman he'd married. In her place was someone smaller, hunched as if expecting a blow. "Jack," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. Thank you for meeting me." He nodded, studying her face. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a sickly yellow, but the fear in her eyes was fresh. "I know about Robert's crimes," he said without preamble. "All of it. The elder abuse, the fraud, the mob connections. It's over, Sarah." She flinched, then sagged, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "What are you going to do?" "The FBI is already involved, but they need more. They need someone on the inside." Jack leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "That's where you come in." Sarah's eyes widened. "You want me to testify against Robert?" "Jack, you don't understand. He'll kill me. We can protect you, Jack insisted. But this is your chance, Sarah. Your chance to make things right. For a long moment, Sarah was silent, her fingers tracing patterns on the scratched tabletop. When she looked up, there was a determination in her eyes that Jack remembered from their early days together. Okay, she said. I'll do it. For William. For us. For everything I destroyed. Jack felt a weight lift from his chest. This was it. The final piece they needed to bring Robert down. As they stood to leave, the diner's bell jingled. Jack looked up to see Robert standing in the doorway, his face a mask of rage. You bitch, Robert snarled, advancing on Sarah. I knew you'd betray me. Everything happened in a blur. Robert reached into his jacket, pulling out a gun. Sarah screamed, and Jack moved. Years of pent-up anger and betrayal fueled him as he lunged at Robert. His hand closed around Robert's wrist, twisting the gun away. They grappled, crashing into tables and chairs. Jack was dimly aware of Sarah shouting, of the diner's other patrons fleeing. But his focus was entirely on Robert, on the madness in the other man's eyes. With a move he'd learned during his years away, Jack managed to disarm Robert, sending the gun skittering across the floor. He pinned his uncle to the ground, panting heavily. It's over, Jack growled. You've lost. As if on cue, the diner's door burst open, and FBI agents poured in, led by Agent Torres. As they cuffed Robert, Jack became aware of a dull pain in his side. He looked down to see a growing red stain on his shirt. Jack! Sarah cried, rushing to his side. Oh, God, you're hurt. He waved her off, his eyes meeting Agent Torres. Tell me you got all that on camera. The agent nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Every second. You did good, Thornton. As paramedics swarmed around him, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him. It was done. Finally, after all these years, it was done. The courtroom was packed, a low murmur of voices filling the air. Jack sat at the plaintiff's table, his side still tender from the knife wound Robert had managed to inflict during their struggle. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional weight of the past few months. As the judge entered and called the court to order, Jack's eyes swept the room. Sarah sat on the defendant's side, looking small and defeated. Robert, in his prison jumpsuit, glared daggers at anyone who dared meet his gaze. The proceedings moved quickly. FBI agent Torres presented the evidence gathered during their investigation, laying out a damning case of embezzlement, elder abuse, tax evasion, and attempted murder. When it was Jack's turn to testify, he stood tall, his voice steady as he recounted the events that had led them all to this moment. The recording of Sarah's phone call from 6 years ago played through the courtroom speakers, and Jack watched as the color drained from Robert's face. But the real surprise came when Marcus Chun, the family attorney, took the stand. The normally unflappable lawyer looked nervous as he cleared his throat. Your Honor, he began, I have a confession to make. For the past several years, I've been gathering evidence against Robert Thornton at the behest of the late William Thornton. A gasp went through the courtroom. Jack leaned forward, his heart pounding. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. William suspected Robert's criminal activities long before his death. He made me promise to keep silent until the truth could be revealed in full. The evidence I've collected corroborates everything Mr. Jack Thornton and the FBI have presented. As Marcus detailed years of Robert's misdeeds, Jack felt a complex mix of emotions. Grief for his father, who had known the truth but couldn't share it. Anger at the years of deception, and a bittersweet pride that William had, in his own way, been looking out for Jack all along. The judge's ruling, when it came, was decisive. Robert was found guilty on all counts, facing decades in prison. The family business and William's entire estate were awarded to Jack, as the only remaining heir untainted by criminal activity. As Robert was led away in handcuffs, still hurling threats and insults, Jack felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Sarah standing there, tears streaming down her face. Jack! she said, her voice breaking. "I know I have no right to ask this, but can you ever forgive me?" Jack looked at her for a long moment, seeing not the woman who had betrayed him, but the girl he had fallen in love with all those years ago. He thought of all the pain, all the lost years, all the what-ifs that had haunted him. "Sarah," he said finally, his voice gentle but firm, "I forgive you, not for you, but for me. I need to let go of this anger if I'm ever going to move on, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. We can't go back. You understand that, right?" She nodded, a sad smile on her face. "I understand. Thank you, Jack, for everything." As Sarah walked away, Jack felt a chapter of his life closing, but instead of sadness, he felt a sense of possibility. He had his father's legacy to uphold, a chance to do some real good in the world. In the weeks that followed, Jack threw himself into establishing a foundation for education and elder care. He used his inheritance to fund scholarships for underprivileged students and to improve conditions in nursing homes across the state. As he stood at the podium during the foundation's opening ceremony, Jack thought about the long, twisted road that had led him here. He thought about his father, about Sarah, about Robert, about the man he had been and the man he had become. "My father once told me that true strength isn't about how hard you can hit," Jack said to the assembled crowd. "It's about how much you can take and keep moving forward. This foundation is about moving forward. It's about taking the pain of the past and turning it into hope for the future." As applause filled the auditorium, Jack felt, for the first time in years, truly at peace. He had faced his demons, righted the wrongs of the past, and found a purpose that gave his life meaning. The story of Jack Thornton, the betrayed husband and prodigal son, was over. But the story of Jack Thornton, the man who turned tragedy into triumph, was just beginning. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.